Hello, friends. Welcome to the Logistics of Logistics show. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today's topic is navigating energy markets with Breakthrough's chief economist, Matt Muenster. How's it going, Matt?
Doing well, Joe. How are you?
Doing great. We had a lot of technical problems before we hit the record button, so I'm glad we're finally hitting record. Matt, please introduce yourself and your company and where you're calling from today.
Thank you, Joe. My name is Matt Muenster. I'm chief economist at Breakthrough. Breakthrough is a transportation solutions company focused upon sustainable fuel and freight solutions for enterprise shippers. We work with businesses internationally in managing their transportation energy costs and their broader costs in moving their freight around the globe. We're a 22-year-old business, been around since 2004. Our core technology, which is called fuel recovery, offered the market an alternative to legacy fuel surcharge practices, a very data-driven alternative that brought transparency into the market and brought transparency into shippers' fuel reimbursement practices. Our focus at that time, and as the business has grown, is always to bring data and information into the heart of our transportation management and solutions. And so at our core, we began managing the cost of energy along truckload moves, but doing it in a way that took into consideration the geography of the move, the actual lane the truck was moving along, the price of fuel along the lane, other elements of those prices that matter, like the actual tax along the lane, price differences on a regional basis, and those dynamics that could occur across the lane, as well as accounting for more real-time and accurate reimbursement practices that focus upon the cost of energy each and every day. And so this brought a new alternative into the market. We've grown considerably from just managing the energy on truckload movements. We're really focused on reimbursing energy across any mode of transportation, and do so today across truckload, rail, intermodal movements, international maritime movements, even managing emissions on international airtime movement. And I have really grown as we've accumulated the data and information from each and all of those moves. Today, Breakthrough as a business is responsible for energy management on about 47 million shipments annually. It accounts to more than 35 billion in transportation spend across our companies that we work with, our clients that we work with. There are more than 16 billion transportation miles in our data ecosystem now. And we're managing an aggregate of more than 2.5 billion gallons of diesel fuel, which is a hot topic in the market these days, especially where we sit it in second week of April.
Yep. So just so I can clarify here, so you guys aren't actually moving freight for anybody.
We're not. We're managing the data and information in those movements to help provide transparent cost, service, and emission solutions to enterprise shippers.
Yep. And you don't have I like this because you're not a 3PL, you're not a carrier, you're not a broker, you're maybe the referee where you say, this is what this gas costs. And before we hit the record button, you and I were talking. And I think as a shipper and as a 3PL, I've experienced this where you go, that's a really good price. And then you're trying to figure out later how they make the money. And then somebody smarter than me comes back and says, oh, they made us so much money on this lane. I go, how'd they make so much money? The fuel surcharges. And that is always a suspicion that a lot of shippers have, is that somehow somebody's getting paid without me knowing. And I think most of us feel strongly, I want my carriers, the ones that I like, I want to continue to work. I want them to do well. I want them to make a profit. I want them to continue to like me and say, yes, Joe, we want your freight. What I don't want is somebody making money in a way that I don't understand.
Exactly. You want to ensure that the way they're making money is in line with market movements, that represents the rates that exist in the market, that it represents the all-in costs that should exist in the market. And that, to your point, that something as volatile as fuel can be transparently accounted for and is treated as a pass-through between the parties in the contract.
And I know there's also, am I right to say people talk in terms of like weekly? Well, that's the weekly price for diesel. And you guys get a little more incremental about that?
That's absolutely correct. The most common surcharge in the market, especially until Breakthrough entered it, was the Department of Energy's weekly retail index for diesel. It is weekly. It is on a leg. It's treating this week's diesel price through last week's diesel prices, which is a little confusing. So operating on the 1 week leg. It's also a one size fits all. It's a national average and at a retail price. And we know through fuel procurement practices that a well-managed carrier can do better than a retail price through various means, just like you and I hopefully don't just drive up to a retail station and are purchasing our passenger gasoline at the pump price. Typically at major chains, you can receive 5% simply through a fuel card or other means. And so those practices are in place. They're very proliferant, especially in commercial transportation. It just the actual market cost that's present, and not only for the truckload market, but for any international mode of freight transportation.
Yeah. So in theory, so let's just say I'm the carrier and you're a shipper, and I say to you, hey, Matt, I'm a square operator. This is what the DOE says to use. This is what we're using. And you go, yeah, Joe's a straight shooter. What Joe didn't tell you was that I'm buying at a great discount to that. And he just go, that's just part of the way the business works. And I'm not saying you want to necessarily take the money away from me. You just want to know how I'm compensated.
Correct. Having that transparency in the market, transparency in those transactions.
Yeah. So who are your customers and what problem are you solving for your customers?
Our customers are large enterprise shippers, usually with over $1 billion in revenue tends to be the footprint, something along the lines of a Fortune 500 footprint internationally. The problem we're solving for them are creating and bringing sustainable fuel and freight solutions into their network. And what we've done as our company's grown, our data and visibility to data has grown, is much more than simply energy management. It's really a holistic approach to ensure that transportation strategies are durable in any market, and that whether it's being executed from a procurement standpoint, operations standpoint, that data and information and transparency we're able to create with our data can be used as an asset for those shippers to make great decisions through any market cycle. And so the problem that we're solving is bringing transparency, data, and insights into all of those different decisions that need to be made, whether by procurement or transportation ops professionals, in the interest of enabling them to consistently make positive decisions and change for their transportation supply chains.
Yep. And by the way, we are talking today, April 13th. The U.S. is now going to blockade the Strait of Hormuz. Now, that doesn't mean all stuff isn't going to get through. Some stuff's getting through. No Iranian stuff's going through. And at the same time, and again, you guys know this, I don't. I just see the news. Supposedly we're going to open up some other strategic reserves could be opened up. I heard the U.S. is able to fill the gap. But for the average shipper who's saying, I'm not an economist like Matt, I don't have insights on, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what I should be paying. I don't even want to worry about it. I want somebody to bring that in for me. So it's not just understanding how carriers bill, it's understanding what the markets are doing. I mean, that's today's topic, is navigating energy markets.
There's plenty to navigate. Calendar year 2026 is not the market that we expected it would be, especially for transportation energy costs. Coming into this year, we thought the more pronounced point of interest, and it still very much is, would be line haul rates and freight rates as we entered a new cycle. We had upward pressure in calendar year 2025 across truckload line haul rates, especially in the spot market, that persisted in the beginning of this year. And we were expecting that was going to be a topic of conversation, especially the availability of trucks in North America. However, shocks do happen. And you had mentioned shippers wishing they had a crystal ball. You can add me to that list. I certainly wasn't expecting a supply shock of this magnitude in calendar year 2026, just as I had not expected, or we had not, our research and economics team had not expected this kind of a shock back in 2022 with different set of geopolitical circumstances, but it's the market we find ourselves in. We think about unpacking the shock for shippers. The first among several reactions is really trying to grasp, okay, what's the magnitude of the shock? What kind of duration might it have? And ultimately, what's the impact it brings to our budget for calendar year 2026, when we were likely thinking our domestic diesel price per gallon, for example, among many other energy types that are impacted, but our domestic diesel truckload price per gallon could have ranged between $3.50 on a national average. It can vary significantly regionally, but say that was the expectation on a national average. Now in national average terms, we're looking at diesel gallons that are near $5 a gallon at the wholesale level nationally, approaching $5.50 or more at a retail level nationally. Regionally, state of California and the West Coast has seen diesel well over $7 per gallon. Other regional markets are catching up in a way. Coast had it worse first in the month of March, and centrally plain states in the upper Midwest are seeing their diesel prices catch up to that. Internationally, it's had a pronounced impact in the market. So there's really no getting around the fact that although we have great domestic energy supplies, it's an international energy supply shock. It's an international energy crisis. And so internationally, freight transportation costs, especially the energy that's moving networks, have significantly become a factor in a year at which we thought we might have a very well-supplied market, and this be a non-issue.
I will say this, though. Nobody has a crystal ball, even Matt Muenster. But you guys, when that shock happens, you've dealt with this year in, year out, month in, month out for a long time. So you know how to look at it, and you know what to expect from it. It's not like you can forecast it without information, but you guys have that information. Anyway, we'll come back to all this in a minute. First, tell us a little bit about you, Matt. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? Some career highlights before you joined the mothership Breakthrough.
Yeah, happy to. I grew up in the small town of Waupaca, Wisconsin, in central Wisconsin. I went to school. My undergraduate degree was in communication at a small college called St. Norbert College in northeastern Wisconsin. So
Where my niece went.
didn't move too far from home. Yeah, it's excellent. We learned that talking with you ahead of today's podcast. So wonderful, small school, very personal, small class sizes is all something that attracted me to it. So I had the feeling of being away from home, although I wasn't far from home. While I was a student at St. Norbert, admittedly struggling to find where I'd fit and where professionally I would move into. I began my college career as a vocal music education major, believe it or not. And that's served me well in the sense that if you can sing in front of a group, then speaking in front of people is really not going to be that hard for you. So that's worked out. But finished with an undergraduate communication degree, but all along as I was taking journalism courses and whatnot, this is happening between 2007, 2009. It was the financial crisis. And so I was just immersing myself in the news of the day, fascinated by what was going on in the financial world, fascinated about what was happening regionally and personally to people around me based on the financial crisis, and ultimately knew that I needed to get back to school and study economics. And also, thankfully, I always loved math growing up. So I was the weird vocal music education major who also took business calculus as an elective as a college student.
I thought there was always a connection between music prodigies and math prodigies.
Definitely. And I'm the father of a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, and I'm seeing that connection come to fruition again. They love math, love music. And so it's really cool to relive that experience that I had growing up through them. But I knew after my undergraduate, I need to get back and study economics. So I took some additional classes and received my master's degree from Bowling Green State in Ohio.
Oh, nice.
I was engaged at the time, needed to find a way back to the state of Wisconsin. My first gig was in analytics for a large regional healthcare system in which I was supplying analytics to a chief medical officer. As things happen, I bumped into a friend from school, longtime acquaintance. He explained he was working for this cool startup in Green Bay, Wisconsin, which continues to be the home of Breakthrough. One thing led to another. I foolishly declined the first job offer I had at Breakthrough and then joined it the second time around in 2014. I'm sincerely grateful that I did, because it's been a fantastic professional and life experience. I've many good friends here and have grown significantly professionally up through analytics-like roles into the time that Breakthrough. In 2014, we had about 30 clients or so. We're in our 10th year of business, but as the business base grew, as we moved into more of any mindset, any mode of transportation, any energy type, any geography that we wanted to be able to manage for enterprise shippers, suddenly different opportunities emerged in the company. And ultimately, we're looking for someone and eventually a team to offer insights to shippers, help them manage the energy market, transportation energy, and then more broadly, as we've added a host of data and information and insights into our data ecosystem, an opportunity to work across freight transportation networks internationally and be able to comment on more than just energy, but ultimately supply demand fundamentals, line haul rates, across markets, across modes of transportation. So it's been a super rewarding experience. Been with the company, be 12 years in July. And I've sincerely appreciated the professional growth I've experienced here, and been a wonderful experience to work with really what was more of a startup at the time to see it mature. We're now wholly owned by US Venture, our parent company. And they're also involved with the distribution of refined products nationally at about 200 different fuel terminals, which provides us with a host of insights, as well as a major player in the replacement tire space. And so there's a lot of synergies across the business. We're focused on mobility products and the data and information that move them.
Yep. You guys got into the data business right about the right time. I've said this every once in a while regarding the transportation logistics business. 20 years ago, somebody would have just said, get me a truck. I need a truck to take my stuff from point A to B. Help me. And then at some point it became, hey, I need a truck still, but I also need technology. I need you to be able to track that for me. I need you to be able to plug into my systems. I might use your TMS. There's a whole bunch of technology that now I expect comes along with the ride. And now I feel like it's get me a truck, bring me technology, and give me data. Prove it. Prove what you're saying is true. Show me the future using data. I feel like it's not quite table stakes, but it's getting there. Am I right to say that?
I think you're right to say that. We've never had more data and information at our fingertips. Accurate data and information is critical to the execution of supply chains, as well as the execution in the future of supply chain. We're all leaning hard into artificial intelligence models and agents. And those models and agents are only effective if the underlying data and information is clean. Clean is a big challenge, and accurate. And so you're absolutely right that these are table stakes. The data and information are.
For the biggest shippers who I think you're working with, and you said you're working with billion dollar companies. So if you $1 billion company, if they're in transportation, or if their transportation spend could easily be $50-100 million a year, enough that it makes sense to get companies like Breakthrough involved, because the little pieces turn into millions of dollars when you've got that kind of spend.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I got a few bullet points, agenda items, so to speak, that I would like to talk to you about. The one biggie, and you guys came up with a cool thing here, it's Strait Talk, but Strait is like the Strait of Hormuz. So talk about what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz and how that impacts not only the overall economy, but how it impacts the fuel that we're using to move stuff around.
Happy to. This has been a point of frequent discussion, nonstop discussion in the last several weeks. Unfortunately, I think it'll continue to be that way for some time, as it's really evolved into the point of being an international energy crisis with a significant supply shock. But in terms of unpacking it and its impact on broader economies, it really starts with energy, because it's such a critical choke point when it comes to the Middle East and all the energy infrastructure and flows that exist there. There are a number of profoundly impactful international suppliers, not just crude oil, but natural gas, whether it's Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Iran in its own part is a significant oil and gas producer. Ultimately, the choke point slows that, and that Iran and the conflicts present in the Strait of Hormuz slows that nearly to a halt, and really it's effectively at a halt. This is extremely disruptive in terms of total international volumes that can get to market in what is today a little over a 100 million barrel per day oil market. We think about major players in the market. It's the US, Russia, Saudi Arabia at present. And we thought about calendar year 2026 in total. We understood that going into the year that Russia-Ukraine conflict would be continuing. That continues to be impactful to energy risk insofar as Russia continues to be a very significant oil and gas player. Now, two, with the presence of Saudi Arabian oil or Saudi Arabia in the Middle East and right there among the conflict, as well as its oil production and gas flows being tied up by the conflict. Now, two of the three largest oil producers internationally are involved with conflicts and risk premia in 2026. It's immediately had an impact on transportation supply chains internationally, and therefore there really aren't many parts of international economies that go untouched. And so some of the early on risks that we're already discussing about at great length in terms of economic impact are, we can appreciate in the United States, we've been trending above trend in terms of our inflation rate for many years. We just haven't gotten back down to the Fed's preferred rate of about 2% annual inflation. We've been hovering between 2.5% and 3% core inflation for some time. An energy shock will again make it difficult to push our inflation rate lower than this in 2026. And ultimately, the higher that energy prices push inflation and even make their way into core inflation over the longer term, we could see impacts to consumer spending, other downstream impacts that then slow the economy overall. Now, it's true that the U.S. produces a significant amount of oil and gas, as well as products that are produced from those commodities, those energy commodities. And so there are some trade-offs here that are a boost to the economy, production of those energy products, and our ability to help support the international community during a supply side shock. But there will be likely pressure on the consumers. And we're already seeing it when we go and fill up our passenger vehicles with gasoline at the pump, let alone prices will start to increase because of the cost of freight transportation and moving products like produce to market. And ultimately, this will gradually make its way to the consumer. Internationally, there's definitely a ripple effect in play. So early on, and really the beginning of April, we've seen the most profound impacts happen in East Asia and in the Middle East, closest to the conflict. We've seen them ripple into Europe and quickly elevate European diesel and other transportation energy costs. And we're beginning to see more of it into North America also, with our oil prices hovering near $100 a barrel per day, but also really intense pressure on some of our refined product prices.
Yep. Am I right to say that the oil out of Iran is more likely to go to China or to Europe than it is to come to the U.S., obviously? So this hurts Europe a lot more than it hurts us. It hurts China a lot more than it hurts probably anybody other than Iran.
Yeah, and other countries that are willing to take Iranian oil products. But you're correct. The immediate impact from Iranian oil specifically and refined products specifically would be Asian countries, and notably China. And China early on took action to actually restrict exports of its own refined products in a move to preserve national supplies. Because while many countries are, China is not a significant crude oil producer, certainly isn't self-sufficient, although really few are, and even the U.S. imports crude oil and refined products because regionally the economics work out. But China simply doesn't have the domestic crude oil production, refined product production to be able to support its own market. And you're right, the immediate impact is stronger on Asian nations than it is here domestically at home.
And I try and stay on the shallow end on this stuff, Matt, so I hope you can give us some insights. Venezuela, they sold oil to China, so to Iran. So obviously we've had a problem with Venezuela. When I say we, the United States, but I think it's other countries too. We took action not so long ago. Now there's negotiation going on between Venezuela and the U.S. So that oil is going to start going somewhere, more likely to the West now, I'm assuming. And then with Iran, we obviously had problems with them beyond lots of problems going back a long way. And it's not for me to say what they all are, but this action taken by the United States also takes another bit of oil away from China. You quickly get into geopolitical jockeying really quick when you talk about oil, because it's not the same. We're not talking about party favors. Nobody's talking about that kind of stuff. Oil changes everything. I think you could go back in World War II and say the Allies won because they had oil.
Oil is a significant factor in geopolitical relationships, has been for a long time. We're also shifting and have shifted into the arena where critical minerals are of a similar nature.
Do you guys keep an eye on the critical minerals too?
They're less of a dramatic impact onto the flow of goods from a transportation perspective. So far less insofar as we just don't have as many electric trucks moving goods in North America, for example, as diesel powered vehicles. And so it just is a far less portion of mind share for our clients, especially when it comes to their budget. And so then therefore we haven't put as much focus onto it. We're really focused on
What's being used today?
what's really present in the market today. Not to say we're not thinking about the impact of electricity in our North American and international freight transportation ecosystem, which it will have, does and will have.
You guys will evolve as electric and as compressed natural gas or liquid natural gas or all that stuff becomes more important. You'll track it for us. So what's interesting about this is nobody knows what's happening in that, but you can get some insights from Breakthrough that you're not going to read from the newspaper. You're not going to see on YouTube or online. And I think that's one of the reasons we have you guys, not just to say, hey, we'll show you where there's money to be saved, but also we can advise you on what's happening in the market ahead of time. So I can't change anything in the Middle East. I can't change anything in the oil markets, but I can shift my sail a little bit to hopefully get a little bit of wind at my back.
We certainly want to arm our clients, other stakeholders in the broader freight transportation marketplace with insights that they can execute with. And so you use the word advisor. Coincidentally, we've used the word advisor to describe publications, actually the name of publications that we've shared with clients for 15 years now, after being encouraged to start forecasting diesel somewhere back around 2010 and probably the price spike that followed with the financial crisis. We've since expanded. We forecast diesel prices and other energy prices globally. So we have different publications that go out across markets in North America, US, Canada, Mexico, in Europe, internationally for bunker fuels. They're also low sulfur products. And so they experience some of this really intense price volatility and upward price pressure that diesel is experiencing now. Also manage freight more holistically in terms of the cost of those movements. And that's what is also covered within these publications. We have a freight advisor to really dig into line haul rate dynamics and how different parts of the United States are responding to different pressures. It's a use of freight advisors.
Is that available for everybody, even non-customers?
So we've shared it with clients for 15 years as we've grown that publication out. Preserved it for shippers, but we have a knowledge hub on our website. So you can go to breakthroughfuel.com, go to the link at the top of our knowledge hub. And on our blog, there are plenty of insights that are publicly available.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the show notes to anything your go-to-market team gives me, including a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website, some of those publications so people can take advantage, because I think the value you guys provide is at the strategic level, but also at the very tactical level. Save me money this week, Matt, and then save me money next month, Matt, and guide me away from the rocks.
So I love those comments. Among the content that we posted, we're providing an update every day on the diesel market within our blog. So there's a specific call out. It'll be the top topic in our blog about the evolving US-Iran war and what it means to the diesel market. Within the link, we're updating one-pagers each and every day. And so if I'm going to help a shipper, a carrier, someone avoid rocks out in the market right now, I think one of the most common talking points that we're helping to coach industry players through right now is to move on from a point in time in which you're paying so much attention to the price of crude oil, because we're forgetting that the final price of diesel isn't just based on the price of crude oil. It has its own unique product premium. And we've got to think about our forecasting, our budgeting in line with the kind of price pressure that diesel's experience. Not just crude oil is the headline. It's going to always be present in the headline. But when we're trying to be accurate, we're trying to wrap our arms around budget impacts. It's each and every specific energy type. We can drill in. We've got the data and information. We can really drill in and get much more specific than just a crude oil.
Yeah, you can go with a guesstimate or go with what the experts have developed. Hey, the second thing I want to talk about is note here that fuel strategy and fuel reimbursement is no longer a luxury. It's something you absolutely positively have to get right as a shipper. Otherwise, you're going to overpay. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, that's right. It's about having the data and information for those moves also is a critical piece of this conversation. When it comes to transportation energy, it shouldn't take an event like we're experiencing in 2026 to understand the importance of specifically budgeting for it and calling it out in your budget. And so when thinking about fuel surcharges or the mechanisms used to reimburse for energy, really need the data and information to be aligned with that kind of ideology of really understanding in near real time what the actual energy cost is in the movement of goods. We really need to break it down by lane. We can be very specific because energy is different on each and every lane. For example, and it doesn't just take an international energy shock to create such unique regional differences that we could pursue alternative energy strategies in one part of the US and really make great sense out of them while maintaining more conventional energy in another part of our network. But without managing and having granular access to the data and information behind those moves, you would never have visibility to those kind of strategic actions that could be taken across your network.
Yep. And I think there's another piece to this is shippers and carriers are constantly negotiating. And I can negotiate saying, hey, Matt's the carrier. And I go, Matt, there's a whole bunch of people who come in $50 cheaper than you or $100. But is that a right way to negotiate? Yeah, it works perhaps, but a better way is to say, I actually have some data that I didn't have before about where Matt's making money. He's got a huge fuel surcharge. He's overcharging me over here. I just want transparency. I'm not trying to take all the money away from the carrier. Again, I think most good shippers want, and most good brokers want their trusted carriers to make a good living. But I just need to know how much you're making, a little bit of a sense for it. And they might say, no, I don't want to give that to you. That's fine. I can get some of that information from Breakthrough and just make better decisions because I have data. And I joke about this. I've said this before on my podcast. When I was at a 3PL, I had a customer constantly complain about the price we were charging them. And they were a startup. And so they're running fast and breaking things. And we constantly expedited 2 or 3 pallets for them, sometimes on full trucks. It was just nuts. And so as it turns out, they're in the Detroit area where I live. And I called the guy one day and I said, I'm going to come visit you. I'm going to bring last week's bills. And I sat down and I said, this is what we got charged by the carrier. Here's what we charged you. And he goes, are you going to show me what you make? Because I think you're ripping us off. I go, let's go through them. As we went through them, and he goes, oh, you made $300 here. I go, keep going. He's like, all right, you lost money on this one. That's because you didn't get a good truck, because you expedited at the last minute. Anyway, I joked with him, but it was the truth. Can you handle transparency? I'm giving you full transparency of what we made. Can you handle it? And most people go, oh, yeah, I get it. You're in business. I want you to make money. But transparency is coming. It's coming for all of us. So you either work within those constraints or don't work with everybody. Stepping off my soapbox.
No, that's right. But to your point, we're enamored by data. We're enamored by visibility. I think we're becoming enamored by transparency. We've helped bring that to the market. I do think the best relationships are open and honest between shippers and carrier partners. And shippers do try to grasp where are cost pressures coming from for their carrier partners. And let's have real conversations about the cost of labor that we're aware is happening in the market, the cost of equipment that we're aware is happening in the market. It's simply about having transparency to these items and not leaving anything buried in the interest of having a open, honest, and data-driven relationship.
And by the way, I've got some notes here. There's some other stuff that you guys do within that same area, sustainability, alternative energy adoption. So I'm supposed to talk to some guys who do like LNG and CNG. As that becomes more and more maybe that's a cost savings. Maybe that's something you do for sustainability purposes. Breakthrough can help me understand those economics. So maybe you go, hey, I just learned from mighty Matt Muenster that I can save some money and be more sustainable switching to blank. Time to talk to some different carriers, or maybe time to ask my carriers, can you help me with this?
When you just dropped mighty Matt Muenster, I kind of flashed to a large, or maybe not so large, but a muscular mouse superhero that I think was Mighty Matt or something like that, and just pictured my head on it. But thanks, that's a first. When we're talking about other opportunities like sustainability, for example, you raise a good point. There's opportunities to think about them in cost savings. Even before we had an energy shock, like I mentioned, there's opportunities to do that on a regional basis, as well as internationally, trying to understand the impact of transportation networks like the European Union's emissions trading system and its ultimately ramp over the last several years in terms of adding additional carbon costs onto maritime voyages, whether remaining kind of intra-European Union economic area where international movements to and from Europe, inbound, outbound, there's an impact, and ultimately we want to bring transparency to what those costs are and not leaving it buried as a separate accessorial or additional charge that shippers aren't aware of. We really have worked to bring transparency to policy changes in different markets, but it doesn't even take that to bring sustainability into a network. It can be the focus upon a corporate goal of reducing emissions. There are opportunities for cost savings. We can also think of sustainability as an opportunity for risk management and risk mitigation in a major way. So when you think about the North American inland distribution market in particular, we're very much focused on diesel to operate our trucks and trains in North America. It's the overwhelming majority of the market. Natural gas, on the other hand, is a very stable commodity price. I realize we have a pretty small base of equipment. There are hundreds of stations around the country, so supply can be there if you wanted to. And we do believe it's growing, that there is more momentum for it, especially through renewable natural gas that can have a significantly lower carbon footprint than conventional energy. And we have the infrastructure to accommodate it. There have been more equipment and really advanced technologies have come onto the market, like Cummins 15-liter engine, for example.
That runs on both diesel and natural gas, right?
And they've built their engines in a way in which they're modified for different fuel technology. And so they have a diesel engine, a gas engine. I think the intention, if they don't have it already, is to have a hydrogen engine. But the natural gas engines gained a lot of traction. I'm sure they'll hear about it, the Alternative Clean Technologies Expo coming up.
So the biggest shippers out there, and that's who I think you're working with, billion-dollar companies, they almost across the board, and people sometimes think this is because of this administration or this governmental administration, regardless, they have sustainability goals because consumers want to buy from companies that are sustainable. And I've always said that we should be moving towards it. And you can't create that, we're a sustainable carrier, we're a sustainable shipper, unless you take the first step. And I believe the first step is just adding one column to your KPI. So we're always going to track on-time performance. We're going to track damage. There's going to be some sort of cost measure. I like to measure billing accuracy. I hate inaccurate bills. And then add one for KPI just for sustainability. And in this case, if you guys could help me with not only the fuel cost, but also what we think miles per gallon on that truck was, now all of a sudden I can have some measure of carbon. And I guarantee any major shipper in the world, when they show the boss, we're also measuring something for sustainability, they're going to be happy. And I always say, it doesn't have to start off being 100%. Like this is 100% accurate. This is directionally correct, 80, 90% accurate. Let's go. I believe that's where everybody should be moving.
And that's where we're taking enterprise shippers. We have a platform that hosts all of our solutions. It's called Felix. And one of the functionalities within our Felix platform is providing emissions baselines and a scenario planning tool for clients so that they can see how different initiatives help chip away at their emissions over time. So if they're aiming for a 30% emission reduction by 2030, they can precisely plan out how they're going to get there and share with their internal stakeholders how they're going to get there from their freight transportation network. Your comment about carriers and working with more efficient trucking companies is really well taken. Often shippers are already well on their sustainability journey. They just haven't taken credit for it. So one particular option that comes to mind is determining which carriers among your base are part of the EPA SmartWay program.
Yeah, that's an easy first step.
Yeah, and we have really efficient tools to help account for and take credit, as well as arrange relationships for shippers with those carriers within our advanced carrier search functionality. But the difference, especially think about this in 2026 terms, we have these high diesel prices that we do have. The difference between a top performing carrier within the EPA SmartWay program and their unranked population, so those that haven't filed for EPA SmartWay, and this is estimated, but it's 2 miles per gallon.
That adds up.
You just think about that has in 2026 the elevated prices. But even the difference between a middle scoring carrier in the EPA SmartWay program and that unranked base is about 1 mile per gallon. So they're really profound impacts to your network and some wins that you can take for how you're already operating based upon those scores, and really just lining them up and getting the accounting in place that you can account for those emissions appropriately.
I was talking to a brokerage team, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and they said, yeah, we need to do something with sustainability. I don't know. There's no time. There's no money. What are we going to do? And I said, what percentage of your carriers are SmartWay? And they go, what's SmartWay? And I showed them. And by the way, the first person who really jumped on it was the marketing person. And she said, oh, we can do this. We should do this. And I said, I would just start right this way, right now. Look at your 1,000 carriers that you currently work with. Which ones are SmartWay, which ones aren't? And then just send a message to these guys saying, hey, over the next 6 months, we'd like to get 100% SmartWay carrier base. Is that possible? Can you help us move? And I don't think there's any cost for carriers to join this, is there?
I don't know with 100% confidence. I'm not sure if there's an application fee.
Well, I like to wing it here, Matt, so I don't think there's a cost.
Hopefully it's marginal. I'd hope there isn't some sort of barrier, because it's in everyone's interest for carriers to improve their efficiency, be motivated to improve their efficiency over time. And certainly shippers want them to.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Next thing I want to talk about is we've talked about the global economic impact from all the oil problem we're having, but it really comes down to this. What's the impact on the market? So can you give that to me week to week or day to day? If I'm working with you guys, what information am I getting this morning that helps me do better on my lanes?
We need to unnumb the numbers. There are a lot of numbers out in the market. It's really making sense of how much first does a change in a barrel of oil by $1 impact my transportation network. And that, when it comes down to the cost of diesel, is about 2.5 cents. So every time that the price of a barrel of oil increases by $1 or decreases by $1, it's impacting underlying diesel costs by about 2.5 cents, just as it's impacting other refined products and your costs to moving trailers and containers internationally. And so we think about forecasting, providing budget guidance, really want to break things down. So you have oil moves. You also have individual energy product moves out in the market. Diesel has what we call a refining premium or refining crack. So this is the premium for diesel or other products in excess of what the input cost of a barrel of oil was at a refinery. Ultimately, every time those cracks or premium move or discounts, there's some circumstance where they're discounts, but every time they move by $1, that's a 2.5 cent change. And so we can model out the change in energy over time based upon that cost buildup, and ultimately bring the fuel cost impact into transportation networks.
I love it. I love it. I'm just curious now, are companies like big shippers that we work with, are they putting in their agreements that we're going to use Breakthrough's numbers on their deals?
Yeah, so they would bring into their agreements that they'll be using fuel recovery as their fuel program, and that will be shared contractually with their carrier base. Any mode, geography, those are the kinds of details you'd expect to see in a contract.
I like it. I like it. And there's certain companies, I know Trimble created PC Myler in every agreement, and it became an industry standard. And we know ahead of time, this is what is expected. Good. It's a great system. And I think same with Breakthrough. I've seen agreements that have Breakthrough in there. I don't know what percent, but I'm assuming it's growing every year.
It is. I can speak to that. It is growing every year. We want the agreement to be reassurance that fuel costs will be treated as a pass-through, that we have the market we have today. We have quickly elevated diesel prices. Our fuel program, our fuel recovery program will effectively pass along more reimbursement for quickly elevating fuel prices, just as it'll change as the market comes back down. And so we really want that confidence to be instilled within those shipper carrier relationships.
So when you say pass through, basically, if I'm a shipper, I'm saying, look, I don't care if fuel is cheap. I don't care if it's expensive. I just want to know that you're not making money on fuel. Not against you making money. I just don't want it being made in fuel because it goes up and down so much that it lends itself to maybe neglect. So I didn't pay attention and now I'm making an extra 10% more, or it lends itself to making money that the shipper didn't know about.
Right. And we're taking mind share and our focus from transportation energy and our fuel costs and putting into places that really matter, our line haul costs, our level of service that we're receiving from our transportation partners. It's really about focusing on the service and partnership to continue in the market.
So what are you telling your shippers right now today? What should they be thinking about? What's going on? What should be on their list? As if they got nothing else to do.
Yeah, as if they've got nothing in the last couple of years concerning tariffs or energy prices or the freight cycle that they find themselves in. A number of things. As it relates to the energy market, our guidance is to think of it as being higher prices for longer, that we have a logistical disruption now. It could prove to be relatively short. We're in the 7th week. Hopefully, for all purposes, we get to a peaceful agreement and peace persists in the Middle East in the near future. That would be the best.
That would be great.
Solution. Right. That would be the best outcome right now. We're still hoping, praying for that. But beyond that, even though we're just 7 weeks in, it's materially changed energy market outlooks for at least the rest of 2026. That we're at much higher prices than what we would have anticipated at the beginning of the year. And so that's a really important consideration. What's also really important in the broader market is longer term labor trends. And these have impacts, different levels of impacts across different geographies, as well as being really data-driven and selective of your carrier partners, because the data and information exists to do that. So as one example, we hear talk from time to time in the US that we have a truck driver labor shortage, and there are varying perspectives on it. My perspective as an economist we saw the truck labor pool grow, or driver labor pool, grow substantially in 2021 and 2022 when wages grew. I don't see that as a structural shortage in a market from economic definition standpoint. Are labor forces for trucking more difficult to acquire? Absolutely. And might make the case that nowhere is it more difficult perhaps than in Europe. And what's also unique about Europe and fuel surcharges is they tend to be percentage based, that it's the fuel surcharge program there tends to be a percentage of the total transport or freight rate. Well, in circumstances where you have a very tight labor market, that freight rate structurally is climbing because the cost of labor increases for the industry because it's in a structural tight place that the median age of drivers continues to grow up, and ultimately they have those stresses in the market. That also means that annually then your fuel surcharge is growing with it, even though it's really labor pulling up your fuel surcharge and not fuel pulling up your fuel surcharge, right? So there are different opportunities to unhinge these different variables in geography. I picked labor as one factor, but there are a number of circumstances in international supply chains where with data information, transparency, we can improve conversations and the management of some of the variables that are driving cost or reducing service or growing emissions across a shipper's transportation.
I'll tell you, Matt, it occurs to me as we're talking that you have a framework for looking at the transportation and logistics and obviously fuel in a way that most people aren't going to look at it. You're looking at it as an economist who has tons of data, who's been doing this for a long time. I think most people are fairly simplistic compared to that, but always interested in getting better. If there's one thing we've all learned over the last 10, 15 years is that shippers have really gotten better and better at trying to understand how to work with logistics companies. For a long time, I sold logistics services. You would never even see purchasing. Purchasing was like, just go see Bob in the back. God, I can't stand all this stuff. The fuel surcharges, the tension, just go back, see Bob. And now they say, wait, we're spending $50 million a year. Bring it up here to the purchasing team and let us understand it. And now there's all sorts of technologies, including what you guys have, understand the business, which can be very confusing.
And I don't want to let it look like a one-way street. I got to give logistics providers some credit. They've gotten better and better of working with shippers.
Oh, of course they have. Yeah.
And for the same reasons that you just outlined, though. It's about the data and information, the models that are possible because of it. And all of that can be used to create and improve relationships.
Oh, yeah. It used to be like any technology project that I worked on, it was like, oh, okay, we're trying to get our 3PL and our carriers to do this. And it's like pulling teeth. Now there's a technology project. You'll see that it's led by, oftentimes, from whether it's the transportation provider or a technology provider, they're way ahead of the shippers. And that wasn't the way it was not so long ago. Anyway, I'm going to summarize what we talked about. First off, before I summarize, I want to understand something. If somebody's listening today and they say, hey, Mighty Matt, tell me how I can work with you guys. What does it look like beyond the sales process when you start onboarding a customer? What does that look like and how long does it take?
When we start onboarding a customer, we can really work to the customer's timeline, first and foremost, that our technology has enabled us to do that. And so from first conversations into working our way through the sales process and implementation, we can accommodate weeks if necessary. We can really move quickly on the implementation of a shipper and their respective fuel program. Commonly can be done through RFPs and creating the consistent communication and messaging to the shipper's carrier base that they're adjusting their fuel program, although it's not necessary. And we've been able to help shippers convert their fuel programs outside of bids also. And so that we really worked hard to reduce that timeline of implementation so we can swiftly and accurately move and fairly move a shipper from a legacy fuel program onto fuel recovery. Also say we're really intentional throughout that time to make the tech burden minimal for our partners, for shippers, for carriers. I want to ensure that we aren't creating a burden. We have a very high retention rate because of the fact that we're able to execute at a high level that we do and not make it a burden. And so we really want the fuel surcharge to provide data and information, accurate reimbursement. We also don't want it to be something that a shipper thinks about.
Yep. Now, I'm assuming you can go back. So let's just say I'm a big shipper and I call you guys and I say, Matt, I don't know, maybe this will work. Maybe it'll save us money. Maybe it'll give us better insights. Can you go back and look at my last quarter or last year and tell me what you might have helped me with?
Absolutely. It's really common practice for us to ask for some historical data and information so that we can provide a very objective output to that shipper and help model out where their opportunities exist within their network.
It's probably to your benefit too, because I'm assuming there's never a time when you say, oh, as it turns out, you guys are doing better without us.
Well, in some circumstances, like for example, in some markets, the breakthrough reimburses at a higher level than the prevailing fuel surcharges. For example, if you're on the Department of Energy's weekly retail index, there are a number of states around the country at which Breakthrough's program would be reimbursing energy at a higher rate than that index. And so there are opportunities where If cost is exclusively the focus and you're a regionally based shipper, that could be the case where they actually on just cost are operating better. We know it's not just about cost. They don't have, right. And they would be losing out on data information to execute and think about things differently to really improve and enhance their strategy. But there would be opportunities where that could be the case.
Yep. And you mentioned technology. So I know you guys have your own, say, technology platform that your customers can go in and look at your information, but I'm assuming you also they can pull your information into their ERPs or their TMSs or wherever they want it.
That's correct. Really focus on integration. We have our Felix platform as the host of our solutions and provide access seamlessly across organizations so that they can access data and information, not just on their freight transportation energy spend, but more broadly on rate benchmarking across their truckload and intermodal moves around North America, Europe, whatever geographies are in scope for them. Focus upon emissions. So we're calculating the emissions on each and every load immediately for shippers. And they can also add on additional layers of analysis into their emissions footprint, whether it's providing a baseline so that they can show internal stakeholders what their transportation emissions footprint looks like, as well as stacking on some of those wins going out on a time horizon and scenario planner to help model out opportunities for them to reduce emissions over the longer term. Bringing all of this, it's really what moving on from a legacy fuel surcharge enables. When you're gathering the data and information necessary for accurate energy management along the lane, suddenly you have the opportunity to really reveal a host of different insights that enable action across the supply chain. So it doesn't just touch energy's part of it, but we can aggregate line haul rates and look at total cost as well as account for emissions that in and of themselves drive cost.
I know you guys, the website says Breakthrough Fuel, but it is really, I don't want to overstate this, but I think it could be called Breakthrough Freight. Really have a comprehensive insight into the markets. All the markets.
That's certainly where we've evolved in a major way during the last 5 years. It's been really fun to see that evolution.
The $1 million question, who is Felix and why is your system named after him?
So Felix is an acronym. It stands for Freight, Energy, Load, Information, and Experience. Really all those attributes.
It's not somebody's cat? Okay.
No, it's not somebody's cat. Not the first time we've asked that. It's pretty impressive too. In this conversation, we brought up a mouse, Mighty Max, and now we've made our way to Felix the cat.
I go off the rails after a while. Matt, I'm going to summarize what we talked about. First off, let me say, I'll make sure I put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website. I'm going to put a link to SmartWay since we talked about SmartWay. And I'll talk to Catherine and your go-to-market team and any of those publications we can get a link to. We'll put those in the show notes so people can follow up and look into what you guys do. So I'm going to summarize what we talked about to the best of my abilities. So we're talking to Matt Muenster from Breakthrough, or sometimes Breakthrough Fuel. I learned a lot about what you guys do because it's so much more than just fuel reimbursements, or just so much more than just, it's when in the world that wants so much data, you guys have tons of data, and it's for nothing you have that data. You guys have, I'm just looking at the notes here, 46.5 million shipments. I'm assuming that's every year, 35 billion in transportation spend, 16.5 billion commercial transportation miles, 2.6 billion gallons of diesel fuel tracked. So you guys have really, at a very high level, insights on all of the things we just talked about. I think when we talk about what we're trying to accomplish, first off, there's the strategic challenge, and we talk about the Straits of Hormuz, but that's never ending. When this is over, we're going to at some point talk about Venezuela. Where's that fuel? We're going to talk about maybe Canada with the issues they have with Alberta. The new pipeline, the new fuels, there's so many conversations and they never end. It used to seem like we had a disruption every year. Now it feels like we have a disruption every quarter. And I think part of that is because we have the visibility into it. We have visibility. When I was a kid, we wouldn't even know there was a Strait of Hormuz. It was like, yeah, unless soldiers are going there, we don't care. You guys give them the big view of the world and of energy markets. And also getting to the very kind of, I'll say more the micro, you guys do this great reimbursement strategy in a way that is much more granular, much more accurate than they're going to do if they're doing it through the DOE. Also, everybody should be tracking sustainability. Talked about smart way. I think everyone should have on their KPIs one KPI for sustainability. And I think if you're working with Breakthrough, you can start using their data to get there. You don't have to guess and say, that was a big truck. I'm going to say the big truck gets 18 miles to the gallon. I have no idea. But the expectations are there now from our customers. So if you're a big shipper, I guarantee they have sustainability goals. Next, we talked a little bit about the freight market impacts. Diesel fuel's gone up. But I think also you guys can tell us a little bit about all the natural gas, the LNG, the CNG, propane, electric. As those modes become more and more important, you guys can work with us. And also we touched about the precision of those rates. We want precision. We get precision everywhere else. Now we're using a market average that's based on a week and it lags. It makes no sense. We can do better. You should do better. Anyway, put a big old bow on this one. Final thoughts on the topic, Matt?
I think you hit it in the wrap up in talking about where we find ourselves in 2026 in the midst of volatility, but it's just the latest, right? And there's going to be more. We really focus a lot of our energy on durable, sustainable fuel and freight strategies, and sustainable, not just in the sense of lower emissions, but sustainable strategies that can endure any market cycle. And in 2026, it's a supply side energy shock. It's also a shift in the rate market driven by the availability and supply of trucks from a point in which truckload rates were relatively flat for a period of years to now where they're feeling upward price pressure and have seen a significant pressure in the spot market. So these markets continue to evolve. There's policy disruptions. It can be focused on decarbonization. It could be focused on the labor force. It can be regional. It can be international. But we're really focused on providing data and insights that help shippers navigate any of these circumstances and ultimately focus upon these sustainable strategies, mitigating their risk of exposure to transportation and energy prices over time, whether that's hedging through larger adoption of sustainable energy or alternative energy, focusing on the efficiency of their network. Really want them to focus on their relationships in the freight marketplace, understand which carrier relationships have really served their network well and have helped them grow their business the way they wanted to grow that, and opportunities to find new partners. We're managing all this data and information to help make these real sustainable decisions possible.
Yep. I like it. Thank you so much for taking the time, Matt. I love what you guys are doing. And I think it just seems like a slam dunk. This, you mentioned earlier, we used to just want the truck. Then at some point we wanted the truck and the tech. Now the truck and the tech and the data. And I also think about you guys as beyond just the data that is, oh, here's the data for my trucks last week. This is data on the whole world and what the world is doing.
It is. In a world where we're talking about the presence, availability of clean and accurate data in the interest of enabling automation, artificial intelligence, it's really never been more important.
I love it. So what conferences will we see you and the fine folks from Breakthrough at? I already know the answer. You guys go to every conference because I see you at every conference.
Yeah. The quicker answer is which one won't, or quicker question is which one won't you see us at in terms of the answer?
I think it's TIA week.
Yeah. So we have a number of different conferences coming up. Some of those include Gartner Expos, so both in Barcelona as well as here in the US coming up beginning of May in Orlando. We have other conferences. I can't seem to find my sheet. Here we go. Smart Freight Week. Actually, teammates are in Amsterdam this week for Smart Freight Week. The American Supply Chain Summit in Dallas for the end of April 27th to 28th. That gets followed by the Gartner Supply Chain Symposium, May 4th to 6th in Orlando. And in fact, I'll be present at that. So I'd love to connect. If everyone listening will be present in person, happy to meet for coffee or something. And Gartner Supply Chain Symposium in Barcelona in May 18th to 20th. So if you want an excuse to get over to Europe or you're there and want to connect, we'd love to connect with you.
Yeah, we should make the point. You guys work with people all over the world.
Yeah. And last but not least, we host our own event. It'll happen this year in Austin, Texas, the first week of August. I know it can be hot in Texas in August, but we're going to have a lot of fun. It's called our Mercury Group. You can see our website for more information on it.
I'll put a link to that. I'll ask Catherine. Catherine will get me that. We'll put that in the show notes.
Perfect. And it's really a curriculum created by shippers for shippers. There'll be plenty of opportunities to network with your peers, as well as to learn more from individuals like me and our research and economics team on what's the latest dynamic and event happening out in the marketplace, whether it's energy, freight, sustainability focused.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for taking the time, Matt. Love talking to you today.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's been a real treat. Thank you for having me on.
You're most welcome. And thank all of you for listening to my show. Your support's very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.